to get any bigger than that. And we have a lot of fun.
What percentage of your business comes from internet service versus, I know you do a lot of things on film, and your film catalog is great, but what percentages come from the internet and what percentage come from like the shop and catalogs and book fairs?
Well, our color catalog is where we put all of our most expensive books and our rarest titles, and that's definitely the engine of commerce. I mean, that's what keeps the store open. Yeah. But I find that these days that it all kind of works together. I mean, there is internet sales, and we sell inexpensive books on the internet every day, $15, $20, $30 books. But people are, since our window to the world is our website, and to a certain extent ABE, but really more and more our website. That's the way people see us. And so I find frequently that I'm talking to someone at a fair or I'm talking to them on the phone or whatever, that their perspective on me has been largely informed by what they've seen on the website. And they look for our new arrivals there and everything else. And it's become such a big part of the way people see each other in the world with iPhones and computers and everything else. And it isn't everything. To me, it's just like the fax machine or the phone. It's just another way that people communicate with one another. But there are pictures, and it's very fast. And so it's all kind of a piece. But in the end, speaking on the phone is just so necessary, especially for an expensive book, because the more expensive it is and rare it is, and the more issues there are, and the more someone's going to want to hear a person on the other end of the line to sort of assure them or tell them that they're getting what they're paying for and that they have the right to return it and all that. So I just find that it all kind of like is synergistic.
When you started in the trade, who were some of the mentors or people that you would go to for advice? Or were you so good that you didn't need it?
Oh, no. I to this day, I look at it as a big continuum. And, I was in my late 30s, early 40s, and I was referred to as a youngster. Actually, I'm still referred to as a youngster. I'm 48. But when I first got started, I scouted for Teresa Johansson, who had run the Kelmscott Bookshop for many years, and she taught me a lot. She was a great business person and always just extremely honest and never, just a straight shooter all the way. And back even when I had no prospects and no reason for her to do anything at all like that, she always educated and told me when to say no and when to say yes and when I was making a mistake. And she was really good. And a little later on, Tom Congleton was a big help, and I had a strong interest in modern firsts, and so Tom kind of took me under his wing and helped me, introduce me to a lot of people in the ABAA and get me into the, help encourage me to get into the ABAA. Peter Stern, certainly, and Jeff Marks, all the modern firsts, Mafia on the East Coast,
sure.
all those guys. I mean, you can't argue with experience, and they had a lot of experience, and they were always very generous.
There are aspects of the book business that are constantly changing, and since the internet revolution, so to speak, what do you see as some of the issues that we're going to be facing, some of the challenges that we're going to be facing as an association moving forward?
Well, I have to say there was a period of time, maybe about 5 years ago, when it seemed like there was a lot of concern that there weren't enough young people coming into the ABAA.
Right.
But looking around, at least in my field, there's a whole generation of young people now turning up, younger than me, 10 years younger than me, getting into the trade, and very impressive people, very smart, it seems like about the same kind of wave that was happening, when I first got started, and the guys who were in my class, so to speak. I think that the ABA is still very strong, and the mark of quality has survived. And like any organization, we have to fight against criticism and the perception that we're holier than thou, and those kinds of things. And but I think that you can't argue with good tradesmanship and and honesty and integrity, and I think that all those things are really important to the organization, and sometimes the organization has proven that by letting go of members that who were problematic in that regard, and I think that's a painful part of having to maintain a standard. But I think it's going to become even more important because the world is moving faster and faster and faster, and when things move too fast, people get a bad deal sometimes, and to have a place where they know they can go, I just think it can only become more important.
You are currently on the faculty of the Colorado Book Seminar. You want to talk a little bit about the seminar, how you view its importance, how you see it going forward in the future? I think it's a major thing as an adjunct to our trade.
Yeah, I love it. One thing I don't like is politics, and so I sort of, at one point when I had an opportunity to get involved with the seminar, the way I viewed it was that I could either get involved in ABA politics or I could get involved with the seminar and give back to the university either one way or the other. And when it comes to dealing with lots of opinions, and booksellers are certainly opinionated, I just had no desire to get into the political end, although I might decide to be a treasurer or something at some point.
Something esoteric.
Something really on the fringe. But I really liked the idea of teaching a lot, even though I had no experience as a teacher. And thanks to the patience of the faculty, I think I'm going into my third year there. It's been a great experience, and we find every year that there's just a big room full of super excited students in every area, from antiquarian books to modern books to eBay, you name it, who want to learn more about being a professional. So
do you see it as being able to continue into the future, Kevin, with the way things are in the world?
Well, I think it's such a hands-on business that I think the smarter people realize that you have to have a hands-on experience to learn. So I don't think that it's something that can be you couldn't possibly compete with an online course. It's just not possible.
Right.
You need to be able to converse and ask questions and propose situations. There's so much gray area to cover that I think that the smarter folks realize that's important. And so many people who have gone on to be good booksellers went to the seminar when they first got started. I wish I had. I didn't find out about it until much later.
We have several members of our association who are graduates.
Oh yeah, many. I talk to people all the time and surprised to find that they went in the 70s or the 80s. Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's always a challenge to advertise, and we find that the best advertisement for the seminar is past seminarians and word of mouth, and just getting the word out that it exists and that it's good and that it's worth a week of your time in Colorado Springs. But it's great. Yeah,
and the cost of it is relatively small in comparison to the amount of information that students are getting.
Yeah, it costs about a quarter of what it would cost to go to a normal seminar these days of the same caliber. So I think it's not a money-making enterprise. It's not for profit, So I think it's a bargain and absolutely necessary. I would have done it in a heartbeat when I first got started if I had only known. So.
Well, in the old days, we used to have 100 to 110 people come to the seminar, and we had a waiting list. And over the years, as it's gone, it's sort of like going on each year a little bit lower. And then we went up, then we went down.
Right.
I personally think it's a terrific adjunct to our trade because it introduces young people to the book business, which is something they probably wanted to get into if they wouldn't be there if they weren't.
Well, I think one of the reasons, if I were to say something that I think is a real challenge, I think it's that in these days, it seems like every year things are moving faster and faster and faster, and the idea of taking a week to stop what you're doing and learn is asking a lot. I mean, even taking a day to do that because a bookseller who's getting started is saying, well, no, I can't abandon my online business for a week, I'd lose all this money and all these opportunities. And so it's sort of a matter of slowing down and realizing what the benefit might be and having a leap of faith,
Yeah. Let's see. If you were entering the book business today, You suddenly come up to a bookseller. So you go to Tom Congleton and say, Tom, I've decided I'd like to be in the book business. What advice would you give me? What advice would you give to someone who asked you that question?
Wow, I wouldn't really know where to start. Be careful. If you're going to be involved with rare books, you might want to be careful about. I feel like that the rare book world and the used book world are really, really diverging. I mean, when I first got started, the idea of like walking into a shop where there was the used books and then there's the rare book room, that was common. But I think those days are coming to an end, because I think that the used books, the only reason they existed really was so that people could read them. And now there are going to be so many more options for doing that. So the rare book market is just a completely different, it's almost like apples and oranges. Yeah. You're dealing with two different kinds of people, collectors and readers. And not that collectors are not readers, they almost always are, fanatical readers. But so I would say that I actually have gotten a chance to talk to some people who are coming up in the trade, and they've asked me that question. And that's one of the first things I say: if you're going to get involved with rare books, you only got this much money. Be really careful what you spend it on, and be thoughtful about, if you take in 5,000 books for not much money, well, that looks exciting, but it's going to take you a long time to catalog all those books, and you could be doing other things and spending your money different ways. So.
That's so true. Talk a little bit about some of the things that you found as you were approaching in the book world. You started and you bought the shop next door to Kelmscott, and you became a bookseller of 7 employees, etc. What are some of the things that you recall as a younger bookseller starting out with this shop? What were some of the problems that you encountered? What were some of the good things that happened because of it?
Well, one of the great things about having an open shop, and we aren't in a real heavily trafficked area, but we have several people through the shop every day, all kinds of people. And a lot of times you'll have a situation where someone will walk in. Well, my two favorite situations are when somebody walks in with something really, really good, and they either don't know it or they think they do know it, and they've got a really trumped up idea of what it's worth, and you have to sort of bring them down off the cloud without making them embarrassed or insulted or, there's that. And then there's this, multiple situations, of course, where people come in with books that have no value at all, and you constantly having to, learn how to talk to them and tell them, let them walk out the door feeling like, well, I checked it out and it was a good experience, as opposed to being angry or distrustful or what have you. All of that has really taught me how to think on my feet, and that at a book fair, like when I'm here, that's all you're doing is thinking on your feet all the time. And it's all of a piece. I mean, whether you're dealing with a person that you're talking to about a $20 book or you're talking to somebody about a $20,000 book, a lot of the same principles apply, like learning how to consider the other person's feelings and considering the fact that they don't have as much experience as you might have with what you're talking about. So the thinking on your feet part, I think, is really a great thing about having an open shop. I left the government because I didn't want to manage employees. I had no idea that I was heading right into the lion's den, and where I would have to be managing more employees than ever. So I've had to learn grudgingly how to be a manager. I'm kind of solitary, and I like working with one person at a time. And I've had to find people who enjoy working with a person like me, because I'm not terribly structured, and so I depend on people to do the structuring for me and give me ideas. But I love my staff now, and I've learned how to hire people. I've made a lot of hiring mistakes, mostly having to do with not calling references or not thinking carefully enough about the person I was hiring and their future and how much they cared about books. So there have been a lot of great things that I've learned just by virtue of having an open shop.
You are a person who is sort of on the book fair circuit, as we call it. Do you do all the book fairs, or are there some that I'm talking about the major ones, are there some that you don't do? What's your schedule?
Well, it's different than it used to be. I used to do a lot more fairs than I do now. I don't like dragging my books around to a lot of fairs because we are fairly successful selling them in the shop by quoting them to people, and these days sending images and all that kind of thing. I want to go to the places where there are the best opportunities to buy or to sell, the very best opportunities. And I like Baltimore and I like being home. And so traveling has limited interest for me. But the ABAA fairs to me are a no-brainer. You have to do them even if it's a slow fair. I joined the ABAA at the beginning of 2003, and I've done every fair just about, and just about every London fair since then too. So I do the 3 ABA fairs in the States and then the London fair just about every year. And I'm almost never, I don't think I've ever been sorry that I did an ABA fair. And then I do a few local ones, probably about another 4 or 5 local ones, one in Florida, the one in Baltimore because it's local to me, and a few others. But I'm not a guy who's like on the regional fair circuit. I'd love to be. I mean, if I could be everywhere at the same time, I'd like it. But I also like to spend time with my wife, and I like her not leaving me.
That would be nice. You might be amused to know that last year Cheryl Needle did 52 book fairs.
Who?
Cheryl Needle.
Oh my gosh.
Matt's wife. 52 book fairs. I don't think I did 52 book fairs in my life. in one year.
Well, I guess if that became your routine, and especially if your wife went with you, or your spouse went with you.
She does them all, and I think she's indefatigable. Talk a little bit about a phenomenon. Maybe it's not a phenomenon in this day and age, but it used to be. The term consignment. There used to be a time when people wouldn't consign books. They would either sell them or send them to auction. But I know that you have a certain amount of your business is consignments. Talk a little bit about the good points and the bad points.
Well, I guess you should start with the bad news first. The bad news is that if you're going to have a consignment with someone, you really have to think about the person you're talking to. I call it the first date. Like when you're speaking to them and and you're looking at this guy and you're thinking, well, he's got some books that I really, really want, but what's he like? Like how many calls a day am I going to be getting from this guy wondering if something's sold, or how exactly, or is he going to be micromanaging me, wagging the dog, that kind of thing? Some people are just like that. And so you have to think real carefully about what the person's like, and even if they are tedious, are they worth it? Are their books worth it? And is it somebody, are you going to, in the end, are you going to enjoy the experience? Or is it going to be a negative experience? And I've had some negative experiences. Not too many, but a few that were pretty bad. And I just sort of had to let them follow their natural course and try to bring them to a close as quickly as possible. But they're definitely in the minority, and I've learned how to make a judgment about whether something's worth it or not. It used to be, if I couldn't buy something, I would consign it. I would do everything I could to consign it, almost no matter what it was, even if it was an $85 book, which I wouldn't do now. But at the time, I needed stock, I needed good books. A lot of times with consignment, like say, for example, you take a book that's $12,500 and you're getting 20%. Well, you're not making a lot of money, but when you come to a fair like this, you're increasing your reputation by having a great piece that you wouldn't have otherwise, and you don't have to sink capital into it. There's something to be said for that. I mean, basically, the only thing I'm putting into it is my time and my effort, and that's the good part. You get to have good books, and if you learn how to get along with people and work with them and stay organized, you can do it. We now send out about 75 consignment checks a month. And we have about 100 plus consigners. So it's a big part of our business. It's all kind of organized. It's in a database. We don't do it by hand anymore. It's good. And the other part of it that's kind of not bad news, but just something that has to be considered, is that you just have to really stay organized in terms of your money, because you've got all this money every month that does not belong to you.
Right.
And you have to escrow it and be ready to pay it out, or you can get behind the 8 ball really fast.
Yeah, I know.
We've all been there a little bit. Yeah,
we've all been behind the 8 ball. What percentage of your business do you do on the internet, and what percentage of your business do you do without the internet?
Well, like I said, it all kind of works together. But I mean, if I had to divide it out, like how much of direct internet sales? Yeah. If you talk about the number of orders, I would say that we probably have more orders on the internet than we do by phone and catalog and so on and so forth. But in terms of income, percentage of income, I would say that non-internet sales, catalog and phone sales, account for at least 80% of our business.
Really?
Yeah, money-wise. And the rest of it, helps us make payroll and, and maintain a presence in the world with less expensive books.
What do book fairs play a large portion, more than, well, let me put it this way. You go to a book fair not just to sell. You go to a book fair to buy and to be seen. What percentage of your business occurs because of book fairs?
Oh, it's almost incalculable.
Really?
I mean, I would say of my significant business, of the business that really turns into significant sales, ABA fairs in particular, increasingly even, this fair being a powerful example. This fair has been one of it's been our biggest New York fair ever. And here we are right at the tail of a recession, so-called. I just can't, I can't tell you, and we had 3 fantastic buying opportunities at this fair, all of which we were able to take advantage of. I've saw books that I didn't know existed. I talked to, you have conversations with dealers all day long that lead to business later on. And it's all because, you're here. And you're standing there and you're thinking on your feet and, So I almost can't put a number on it. I would say it's critical. I always say the only thing that keep me away from an ABA fair would be a family emergency.
So far he's dedicated.
So far we're good.
Let's see what happens after he turns 50. Just for to sort of wind things up, just imagine a crystal ball in front of you. Take a look inside and tell me what you see for the book business 5, 10, 15 years in the future.
Well, I think everybody's a wee bit freaked out about, especially people who sell content, like Americana dealers and, selling stuff to institutions. Everybody's a little bit scared about, how everything in the world is being digitized, and libraries can get their information a lot more ways than just buying it in a pamphlet that we're selling. Yeah. Not as big a deal for me, because the 20th century stuff that we worry about selling, even the stuff that we sell to institutions, is often more about the object than it is about the content. So it's about ownership of the object or something that's unique, like a letter, some manuscript. But I think that content problem, I was speaking to somebody about that just last night, an Americana dealer that's a friend of mine. And I think that that's something that those guys are gravely concerned about, and with good reason. And even talking about maybe perhaps finding a way to take ownership of that content so that you can actually make money in the digital world based on content that you have acquired. It could get complicated, but it also could be lucrative. It's going to be a brave new world in that respect, I think, and a lot of wild stuff is going to be happening in the next 10 years or even 5 years in that regard. As far as rare books, I think that rare books are going to get rarer and common books are going to get more common. That trend is obviously continuing. Although I feel like that the internet shift, the price, the great adjustment that happened when the internet made everybody aware of what was out there, has kind of, it's not that it, what's the word? It's kind of come to an end in this, not an end, but it's bottomed out in that everybody kind of has their stuff online now. And I think all of the adjustment that's going to happen has, 80% of it has happened. There's going to be a little bit every year, but it's not going to be nearly as dramatic as it was in the last 10 years. So in a way, that's good news. But I think that people, the more digital things become, I think the more interest people will have in objects and original objects. I mean, witness the recent comic book sales for $1 million. Two different examples of $1 million+ sales in the last month and a half at auction, and that's all very encouraging to me because that's paper and that's what we sell. So I think that it's going to be a good world, but I think that the rare book business is going to have to it's almost like a rocket that's going up into space, and a part of the rocket falls off and they separate forever. And I think that's what's going to happen.
Well, great. Thanks a lot, Kevin, for participating. Enjoyed it. And sell some books this afternoon.
Thanks, Mike.